self-described community organizer, making everyone feel that he or she is part of Nancy's large neighborhood. She's totally plugged into what's going on. We'll see if that's true of Lachtis and Hamantashen. Brings her knowledge and connection to the benefit of her very extended set of friends. She spent more than 2 decades in television as writer, producer, reporter, and news anchor in multiple cities, recently as on-air talent for WQED, and has lived in the Berg since 1985. Nancy.
We're going to take bets on how long this hat is going to stay on my head. I'd like to thank Cantor Berman, for inviting me to do this. I'd like to know if I have Rabbi Jamie to blame for this. And I want to say to my esteemed colleagues that I'm honored to share the stage with you tonight, and I'm more than a little intimidated by your impressive talents, your keen senses of observation, and I'm going to do my best to hold my own here against you because you set the bar very high. In my 40-year career in the media, I have worked as a TV news reporter, as you heard, and an anchor, as a writer, producer, and host of various television shows, and for the past 14 years as a publisher and editor of a magazine. Throughout all of that, words have been the number one, there we go. Never mind. Words have been the number one tool of my profession. So I would like to examine the Latki and the Hamantash simply from the perspective of the words themselves, how they're constructed, how they're pronounced, what other words describe or are associated with them, and what meanings and connotations those words have. So let me begin with Latki, a nice two-syllable word that is spelled exactly as it is pronounced. Lat, L-A-T, ki, K-E. It's made from a potato, another word that is spelled exactly as it sounds. Po, P-O, te, T-A, to, T-O. Unless, of course, you are former Vice President Dan Quayle, who so famously in 1992 corrected a 12-year-old spelling bee contestant's spelling of the word and added an E to the end. For the rest of us, it's clean and simple. Potato, latke, P-O-T-A-T-O-L-A-T-K-E. Easily spelled, easily pronounced. Hamantash, not so much. For starters, there are several ways to spell it, although not nearly the number of options that the word Hanukkah offers. When writing the name of the holiday where we traditionally eat latkes, you have to make decisions. Start with an H or a CH, use one N or two Ks or one. For Hamantash, there are two acceptable forms of spelling, one ending with T-A-S-H, which is the form that Temple Sinai uses, but you'll also find the word spelled with T-A-S-C-H as well. And then there's the issue of pronunciation. The word begins with the name of the villain in the Purim tale, Haman. Yet we don't pronounce the food Hamantash. No, we eat Hamantash. Since when does an A sound like an O? So, between the multiple spelling options, the pronunciation issue with Hamantash, I have to give this round to latke. And speaking of round, let's talk about the shape of the two items in question and the words that define them. The latke is round, it's a circle. I say the word circle, that most centric and balanced of all shapes, and you know what I mean. There are no variations on a circle. The Hamantash is a triangle, but that one word alone is not enough of a descriptor, as triangles come in many forms. No, you have to say that a Hamantash is an equilateral triangle, meaning its sides are of equal length, and all three angles are measured 60 degrees. As a writer who's always striving for clarity, I've got to go with circle over triangle. Now, let's examine the words circle and triangle, the basic shapes of our latke and Hamantashen, and their use in our culture. We have literary circles, theater circles, dress circles, circles of friends, circles of influence, and the circle of life. You feel good about all these circles. I would argue that subliminally, you transfer all of those positive associations with circles to the round latke. As for triangles, well, there's the Bermuda Triangle, bum, bum, bum. Also known as the Devil's Triangle. It's where a number of planes and ships are said to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. There's a nice association. And then there's the Love Triangle, which throughout history has proved fascinating, scandalous, and often tumultuous. As examples, there are Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon, and Anne Boleyn, Charles, Diana, and Camilla, Donald, Melania, and Stormy. Think about that the next time you bite into a Hamantash. It'll be huge, believe me. Of course, there is one strong positive association with the word triangle that I can't in all fairness ignore, and that is Pittsburgh's own beloved Golden Triangle, the centerpiece of the city that we hold so near and dear. The next time you are up on Mount Washington taking in the view of downtown in the golden glow of sunset, imagine our skyline as a large golden Hamantash. Let's talk about songs for a moment. Many songs have been written about circles. Joni Mitchell's The Circle Game, Elton John's Circle of Life, and that gospel classic, Will the Circle Be Unbroken, just to name a few. The triangle? Again, not so much. Barry Manilow once wrote a song and recorded it called The Bermuda Triangle. And if you've never heard of that song, I can assure you after hearing it for the very first time the other night, there is a good reason why. And I say that as someone who has paid good money to attend a Barry Manilow concert. So, despite the points that the triangle gets for its association with downtown Pittsburgh, as a writer, I would still argue that the preponderance of positive connotations for the word circle far outweigh the negative ideas that are brought to mind with the word triangle. And so I have to give another point to the circular latke. However, when we consider the word potato, the main ingredient of the latke, and the way the word is used, the way that word is used in our society, a different picture emerges. There are couch potatoes, not exactly an honorable designation. If something is small potatoes, it doesn't add up to much. And when something distasteful rears its head, people often drop it like a hot potato. Unlike the potato's role in a latke, it's hard to determine the main ingredient of a hamantash. There's dough, of course, which is made of several things, and the filling can be anything from poppy seeds or cherries to apricots or Nutella or whatever. So let's just work with the word cookie instead, since a hamantash is often described as something of a cookie. If someone's a smart cookie, that's a good thing. Our computers have cookies in them that leave traces of where we've been online. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. But if someone tosses their cookies, there's no question that's a bad thing. So, comparing connotations associated with the words potato and cookie, I'd say it's generally a wash with maybe an edge going to the hamantash for being one smart cookie. Finally, I'd like to look at the potato and the cookie, representing the latke and the hamantash, in the context of proper nouns. Despite Dr. Cyril Weck's history with Larry Latke and Harry Hamantash in the limousine in 1963, which he so eloquently detailed in last year's debate, I actually could not find any reference to these two characters in my own research, or any other beings whose names incorporate the words Latke or Hamantash. However, everyone in this room, I'm sure, knows the name Cookie Monster, that beloved member of the Sesame Street gang who devours all kinds of cookies, including, I'm sure, Hamantashen. His blue shagginess, rough voice, and obsession with cookies have made Cookie Monster a cultural icon. But, for my money, Cookie Monster's influence is superseded by a beloved figure that has been delighting children since 1952. I'm talking, of course, about Mr. Potato Head. His longevity alone makes him a superstar. Add to that the creativity that he sparks in children as they apply his facial features and his appendages in any which way they want, and top it all off with supporting roles in 3 Toy Story films, 2 of which were honored with either an Academy Award or a Golden Globe Award, declaring the film the best. And you've got a powerhouse of a proper noun in Mr. Potato Head. In summary, I think it's quite clear that while both foods, latkes and hamantaschen, are delicious and deserve a place at the table, anyone's table, Jew or non-Jew, I might add, from a writer's perspective, I have to give my support in this illustrious debate to the latke, which has only one accepted spelling, is pronounced the way it looks, by its shape is associated with all of the beautiful and lofty circles in our culture, and has as a figurehead Mr. Potato Head, unquestionably one of the most popular characters in American culture. Let's just hope that he does not end up swimming in oil in a frying pan on a Hanukkah evening. Thank you, and happy Purim.
Thank you so much for that. It's my privilege to introduce our next speaker, the Honorable William Pudeau, Mayor of the City of Pittsburgh. He was elected mayor in 2013, having previously served the city he loves in other roles, including on our city council. He's dedicated his career to preserving the unique character of Pittsburgh that so many of us love, while making sure that we work together to make Pittsburgh a place that works for all. He spent his time in office really putting people first, investing in affordable and mixed-income housing so that no one is left behind. He's worked with stakeholders to invest in our future by providing summer employment opportunities for youth. He's helped to address food insecurity through the city's free after-school meals program serving children and people with disabilities. He's also been investing in our communities to keep us safe, hiring many police officers, firefighters, and building inspectors. As our economy's changed, he's had a direct hand in community-based development, tying our economy to our vibrant neighborhoods, and he's created far greater transparency in our government. He's working really hard to change the trajectory of the city, to bend the arc, and as he comes forward, let's thank him for all he's done tirelessly, and I know this because this is the second event where I've seen him in 2 days. Thank him for all he's done and all he'll be doing for the city of Pittsburgh.
It's always great for a politician when your introduction is longer than your speech. I got to tell you, this is pretty much the most difficult speech I've given as the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. I'm a Catholic boy, and I love a good latke. I had not even heard of a hamantash until I had to prepare for this. I think I went to high school with someone named hamantash, but I wouldn't know, and I don't think that I've ever had one, but I may have. They look an awful lot alike Italian Christmas cookies, which would then be another common ground between the Jewish community and the Italian community, other than a mother's guilt. So I don't have a basis of knowledge to be able to choose one or the other. So what we try to do in city government is we've moved to a data-driven decision-making process. The ability to look at issues through the lens of how does it affect Pittsburghers, but at the same time, what are the critical issues that we're trying to address? So you want to have as many buckets as possible to be filled in making a decision, and that decision being able to have an effect over the whole. So in looking at this, we had to look very, very closely, and I had my whole office working on this for a week. We found the 10 most important issues affecting not only Pittsburgh today, but the very future of the city we love. And we wanted to find out how it could be analyzed in order to make a decision. I thank you. That's good. That is really good. So, 10 issues. Number 10, which is better to eat on a bike? Good energy. You got fruit, carbs, but the latke, the potato versus the pastry, not as messy. So we're going to give that one to the potato. Which is better, to fill a pothole? The Laki has good texture. Good city water. It has good texture, but it's soft. Pastry can be used, can be put. The fruit will attract squirrels. People will run over the squirrels, and the squirrels will fill the potholes. Which would be the best substitute for the Pittsburgh parking chair? Hamantash, fanciful little three-cornered treat. Laki, good, wholesome, blue-collar potato meal. It's a Laki. Which is the easiest to remove from Dan Gilman's beard? The fruits get mixed in with the beard. There's red and there's other colors, and it kind of gets difficult. The potato you can comb right through. Which city council candidate would make the best dish? Now, many of you probably know that I'm supporting Erica in this race, but for God's sake, Sonia Finn is a James Beard Award-winning chef. Of course she would. Which would be the best companion food to PWSA water? Well, the Laki salt would nullify the chlorine levels, but the pastry hides the taste. Number 4, which one did we send to Amazon? I'm sorry, I can't tell you. Number 3, which one sticks better when thrown at the Sprint billboard on Mount Washington? Well, the Laki has oil, and that's really good, but the sign's made out of vinyl. But if you have enough strawberry little pastries, it starts to look like a Verizon sign. Number 2, which one is better at stopping landslides? Neither. Landslides are act of nature. We have hills, people. They slide. And number 1, which is better as a substitute for plowing snow off our streets? Well, it's true. The Hamantash will leave a nice little trail, so you'll know the plow has actually been on your street, but it's the salt that melts the snow. So with that, the total is 4-3. Peduto supports the potato.
Thank you for that. I suspect that's your next campaign ad. Our next speaker, our next debater is Wasi Muhammad, who is the executive director of the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh. He grew up in Harrisburg and attended the University of Pittsburgh to earn degrees in neuroscience, the history and philosophy of science, and religious studies. Perhaps those are more aligned with this debate than you think. He's held several leadership positions in Pittsburgh, including founder and executive director of the Office of Served Student Civic Engagement Council, executive board director of the Resident Student Association, and director of the Food Pantry Program at the ICP. As I said, he's currently executive director of the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh and honored us by being the keynote speaker at last year's annual meeting right here at Temple Sinai. Please welcome Wasi.
All right, I gave up on the hat immediately. There's nothing I could do about that. Well, thank you, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. I'm hoping. Oh, you want this microphone? Oh, this one close. I'm sorry, the height thing. How we doing? Can you hear me? Okay, this is important. We talked about data, data-driven solutions. That's how I'm going to start today. Like they mentioned, my majors in college were neuroscience, philosophy, and the history of philosophy of science. So I'm going to stick to those subjects that I know a little bit about. The first is neuroscience. So I had never heard of either of these things until a little bit earlier. So it doesn't really come up in my tradition. So what I did was do some research. And one of the first things I came across, which I'm surprised nobody mentioned, was the University of Pittsburgh's Brain Institute study on Laka versus Hamantash. It's a big foundational study. And first off, little neuroscience lesson, right? Like, what makes things taste good? So how does taste work? So whenever you eat something, right, the first thing that happens, you have like these taste receptor cells in your tongue, and then from that, there's something called semaphorins, that are little transmission like molecules, right? They send a signal up to particular neurons in your brain that tells you what something tastes like, you see? So things taste good or bad depending on how that works. So they did this study, and they found that 99% of people who were surveyed just loved Hamantash, right? So much so that they had to create a new neuron that they called the Hamantash neuron, because usually it's just sweet, it's sour or bitter, but they're like, this is so good, it's got to be something else. So they just decided it's Hamantash neuron, right? So we got that one out of the way, and they also did a study, and they're feeding people latkes, and they're like, how do you feel? And basically everybody threw up and almost left the study. It was very difficult to get them to hold down, Hey, I'm giving the facts. I didn't tell you where I stand yet. That's all I'm telling you. So, but what they found is that sometimes those molecules, those semaphorins that send that signal, get screwed up, right? So whenever that happens, that's whenever somebody gets hit in the head and they used to love this food and now they hate it, right? And things like that happen, and people have diseases and disorders. So when that happens, that molecule, instead of going to the right neuron, right, instead of like, say, going to the neuron that tells you that this is a latke and I should throw up, it will go to a different neuron. So what they found is that 1% of the world population eats a latke and thinks it's good. Just 1%. And it's because of a disease. They have a disorder. Like, they just taste it and they think that, okay, this is going to a different neuron for Hamantash. So anybody who eats latke and likes it, thanks the Hamantash neuron. That's really the real reason. That is the first neurological study that happened. Second, just shortly, there was and real quick PSA though, if you think that latkes taste good, please contact your family physician immediately after this. There's a good chance that person's in the room right now. It could be quick. This is really important for y'all to address. Another study, just to shortly touch upon, that's also being conducted right now. The subject of the study's identity has to be confidential because it's not over yet, but this one suggests that excessive latke intake might cause significant brain damage. Sorry, be careful everybody after today. And it could also turn you orange, So the latter is a confirmed symptom. You do turn orange. But the extent of the brain damage is being studied over the next 2 to 6 years, depending on how 2020 goes. So we're going to review that and come back to it. But brain damage is likely. There's sub-level of it. Aside from the neuroscience and the science, right? Let's move on to the philosophy, the bigger questions of life. And it's interesting. I wanted to point out that a lot of you may not have heard of that study, despite it happening down the street, and there's a reason for that. And I'll go over it at the end, but just keep that in mind. Second is why I want to talk to you about a couple quotes and why you haven't heard the rest of these quotes. For example, one of these famous philosophers, René Descartes, said, "Cogito ergo sum." I think, therefore, I would never eat a latke. Or we can look at Socrates, who said, the only thing I know is that I know nothing and that Hamantash is better than latke. So I just wanted to touch upon those, but I wanted to focus on a more contemporary scholar, right? From Los Angeles, now of New York, formerly of Chicago, the Zen master, philosopher Phil Jackson. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of him. So Phil Jackson, as long as being a philosopher, was an NBA coach. And he won 13 NBA championships, 11 as a coach and 2 as a player. And you know how he did that? Running the triangle offense. Just saying. Just saying. So, when asked, how did you come up with this? What inspired you? He said that originally I had my players running around in circles, and everything was flat. Nobody was excited. It was awful. And then I had a hamantash after one day in the locker room after a rough game. And then he won 1,200 games. And he said, I owe all my success to the hamantash offense. Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan helped a little bit too. And when they asked Michael Jordan why he retired in the middle of his career before returning only a few years later, he said that he accidentally tried some latke and needed some time to recover. So we all understand how those wins happened and how the Zen master got his name, the noble hamantash. Finally, right, to end off, philosophy of science, major number 3. Pitt's paying off. This is finally it. I get to use my degree. This is the first time. So I couldn't figure out, after looking at all these philosophers and looking at the science and looking at everything, how is this still a debate? It's pretty one-sided. Like, everything kind of leans towards one direction. Like, I've tried to be unbiased this whole time. And hamantash seems to be the clear winner. And I looked into it, and then I didn't get it until I read this book called The Merchants of Doubt by Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway. So this was a book that explains how a loose-knit group of high-level scientists with extensive political connections ran effective campaigns to mislead the public and deny well-established scientific knowledge for over 4 decades. So essentially, these physicists from the Manhattan Project and other places, so what they did is like having a PhD. They go on TV and be the contrarian to everything as long as somebody paid them enough, right? So they did big tobacco, acid rain, ozone hole, global warming, DDT, and latke, of course. Obviously, this is where it's all coming to. If you read the book, it's in chapter 8. Has anybody read the book? Perfect. So what happened is that, I just came to it. I was like, all right, now we figured it out. When tobacco, they're trying to convince everybody that secondhand smoke wasn't a big deal. All they did was hire a bunch of experts to show up and say that, secondhand smoke doesn't do everything. I'm a doctor. You should believe me, right? They didn't know any. They weren't even doctors. They weren't MDs. They were physicists. However, it worked, as long as there's somebody on the other side and they paid them enough, right? Now it all makes sense. So every single person who chooses the other side of this argument sides with latke, is either part of that 1% with that brain disorder and should talk to a physician. That's one. Or they're in the pocket of big latke, the latke lobby. Just say it. I mean, you got to say, there was one politician here today who takes campaign contributions. He went to one side. I didn't run for nothing. I'm just here to spread some knowledge. So they've been lying to us for centuries. And, and what I've realized, and to close today, right, this might be the last thing I ever get to say to you. This is difficult for me, I've been researching the latke industrial complex, and it's dangerous. I don't know how deep the rabbit hole goes, but the last thing I want to leave with you is that before anybody else speaks, and while you think about this debate and who should win, just think about it. I didn't take $1. I'm just here for y'all. I want you all to be okay. I just want you, if you have that disorder where you think that this is a reasonable food to eat, get it checked out. And if somebody else tells you the other way, read that book later, much later. And read those chapters and see that they're just trying to trick you. And hopefully our children's generation will never have to be forced to endure something like that little potato thing ever again. And hamantash's were ruled today. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
It's so nice to hear years of study pay off. Our next debater is Lynn Cullen, who's a radio talk show host here in Pittsburgh. She hosts an internet radio talk show on Pittsburgh City Paper's website and is a regular panelist on WQED. She also has been a regular on numerous other TV and radio stations and has numerous awards to her credit, including an Emmy, 4 Golden Quills for journalistic excellence from the Pittsburgh Press Club, 3 Pennsylvania Associated Press Broadcaster Awards, and the YWCA has honored her for rigorous work against racism and bigotry. She has numerous other honors and awards, including Best Talk Show Host and Person of the Year in Communications. She's attended the Neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater in New York, Northwestern University, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she received her degree in journalism. She also received the Printer's Devil Award from Women in Communications for her ability to see humor in the world and to puncture the pompous among us. We saw a great example of what she has to offer during the debate last year, so all I can say is parental discretion is advised.
I'll tone it down. I'll tone it down. All right. If some of you get some deja vu, it's because, yeah, I'm going to do the same thing I did last year. Except last year, some woman, I remember her as a little old lady. If you're here, I'm sorry. She said, "That was good, but pull the hair out of your face." So this is for her, if you're here. And I looked at myself because I thought, you know, I look a little bit like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Right? Now I look really like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, an elongated version. Okay. I just want to say this because nobody has, and it's not that I'm complaining, but I want the record to show that the few misguided souls arguing the Hamantaschen's case have a decided home field advantage since this is Purim. It ain't Hanukkah. I'm just saying. Now, I come in praise of the potato pancake, a delicious and versatile dish made from one of God's truly greatest creations, the potato. Entire economies have been based on the potato. People have lived by the potato, and people have died tragically for want of a potato. It's the only tuber I know that has a famine named after it. And then ask any school kid. You can use a potato to make a clock. Or use a potato to make electricity to power a small appliance. Try that with a Hamantaschen. And the latke has even been honored by having a beloved television character named after it. Latke Gravis, portrayed by the inimitable and deceased Andy Kaufman on Taxi. I'm just saying. Hamantaschen has not been given the same standing in our popular culture. And that means something. Don't ask me what. But enough about the extraordinary utility of the potato, and on to the wonders of the simple pancake made from it. Here is a food that with one bite takes you on a multifaceted, sensual trip of pure pleasure. Start with the intoxicating aroma as the nose alone is first rewarded. And the nose knows that something wondrous must await. And then it comes with that first crunchy bite that delights the ear and the tongue, followed close by the swoon-inducing creaminess of the interior, and with the addition of a dollop of sour cream or applesauce, you flirt dangerously with sensory overload. And the versatility of the latke. I have had latkes for breakfast. I have had latkes for lunch. I have had latkes as a side dish at dinner and as an hors d'oeuvre at the finest catered events. Hamantaschen? I'm just saying. And now to get a little historical. Because, let's face it, we Jews in the past have had to pack our bags rather quickly and get out of Dodge more than once. I just want to point out that latkes are flat. They're easier to pack and stack up nicely with matzah in this regard. Hamantaschen? I'm sorry. They're bulky. They take up too much space and they offer too little nutrition. Not good survival food for the Jews. And from history, let's move to science, as others have. And as others have noted, the latke is round, the hamantaschen a triangle. I hate to go all geometric on you, but spheroids are simply better than triangles. Okay, we're on the run. Let's say we've made our getaway and we got on our backs our latkes and our matzah, and the Egyptians or the Cossacks or somebody is closing in. What do? We circle the wagons, do we not? Because circles do not have a weak spot. They strengthen our common defense. Triangles? Nope. So here again, the spherical latke outperforms the triangulated hamantaschen. And just one more obvious thing. Hamantaschen is meant to be representative of Haman's hat. Yeah. Now that is interesting because an expression we all know about eating hats. When something is so ludicrous, when something is simply not ever going to happen, like Donald Trump getting elected, you would say, if Donald Trump gets elected, I'll eat my hat. I'm sorry. You know, it means it ain't gonna happen. Or it used to. You aren't gonna ever have to eat your hat. But strangely, this bizarre custom of hamantaschen is about actually eating the hat. Something no one would ever want to do. And whose hat? The hat of one of the nastiest, slimiest, evilest, cruelest villains in Jewish history. You think it makes any sense to celebrate the courage of Queen Esther by dining on the hat that sat on her tormentor's head? Ugh. And what do you want to bet he had dandruff, too? All right, if that image with which I leave you doesn't put you off Hamantaschen for the rest of your natural lives, I will eat my hat.
Can't say I didn't warn you. Our next and final debater is Rabbi Karen Gorbin. She is associate rabbi, of course, here at Temple Sinai. She received her ordination at Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, and before coming here, served as assistant rabbi at Temple Sinai in Denver from 2012 to 15. She grew up in Bridgewater, New Jersey, and a few inspired educators, passionate rabbis, and engaging cantor transformed her relationship to Judaism and Jewish learning, maybe cooking too, we don't know, leading her to be a madricha in her synagogue's religious school, and to join her temple youth group and NIFTY, and to attend Jewish summer camp. In trying to decide between not Lakia and Hamantaschen, but between being a doctor or teacher, she realized in 10th grade that she could do both by being a rabbi. Her passion for healing led her to study health, science, society, and policy, exploring the intersection between Judaism and health. As a rabbinic student, she continued to integrate her interest in health with her passion for Judaism through chaplaincy at St. Anthony's Central Hospital in Denver, and as a rabbinic intern at 2 nursing homes. In addition, she served congregations in Montana, British Columbia, and Arizona, taught Jewish history as a teaching assistant at the University of Southern California, and was a student rabbi at Schwader Camp. Judging by her academic regalia, she'll soon be a doctor of divinity. And of course, you all know her many contributions here since coming here about 3 years ago. Please welcome Rabbi Gorbin.
We gather here this evening to honor the life and memory of our beloved Hamantaschen, to accompany them to their eternal rest, and to comfort those who think that they're the best holiday treat. Whether you enjoyed making Hamantaschen at home or prefer to buy them, there were always enough different fillings that everyone could feel like there was one made especially for them. So we mourn the loss of this great treat together. The words of the Psalms and prayers that we will say are here to bring us comfort and solace as we say goodbye to the Hamantaschen once and for all. A reinterpretation of Psalm 23. The Lord is my baker, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in cool metal bowls. He leads me beside the quiet flour. He refreshes my dough. He guides me along the right baking sheets for my name's sake. Even though I sit in the darkest, hottest cave, I will fear no evil, for you keep an eye and a timer on me. Your spoon and your spatula, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil and butter and keep my pocket from overflowing. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the pantry of the Lord forever. Hamantaschen came into the world in the mid-1800s in Eastern Europe. They are the children of Osnay Haman, who were born around 1550 in Mantua, Italy, and Montaschen, German poppy cookies, who were born about 250 years later. This unlikely love story began more than 200 years before Osnay Haman were born. The poet Emmanuel ben Solomon, who, had he been a rabbi, would have been called Ribs, anachronistically attributed a medieval Italian practice to the Persian response to Haman. He posited that just as Italian criminals had their ears cut off before execution, so too were Haman's ears, Oznei Haman, cut off. But still there was no holiday treat, just a name. Now, the first Oznei Haman likely came into existence to accompany Mantua's Purim Spiel around 1550, using the pop cultural references of the time, the Bible, and using the precursor to Abbott and Costello-style humor. The spiel played with the similar sounds between Ha-man, the manna that the Israelites ate in the wilderness, and Haman, the Hebrew pronunciation of Haman. One of the characters in the spiel mistakenly thinks that the Israelites in the wilderness ate Haman instead of manna. So the town celebrated Purim and their wonderfully geeky pun by reviving the name Oznei Haman and giving it to their Purim cookies. As Oznei Haman grew up, they traveled throughout Europe. They found a home everywhere they went and were particularly welcome in Germany and Eastern Europe. But while Oznei Haman gained more and more prominence in the Jewish community, an interloper was beginning to make its appearance in Germany. This interloper was known as Montaschen, or poppy pockets. These Montaschen were devious and threatened to overtake Oznei Haman as the favorite Purim treat. After all, poppy seeds are delicious and have the added benefit of letting you test positive for drugs without having to take any. It was particularly good for those straight-laced Jews who wanted to seem like rebels without actually being rebellious. Anyway, Montaschen also traveled quite a bit throughout Eastern Europe and found many opportunities to thrive and flourish. It took some time, but the Eastern European Jews finally saw that Montaschen and Oznei Haman were both lonely and decided to set them up on a date. Busy as they were, it took months before they were even able to get together. Coincidentally, their first date was on the 14th of Adar. When they showed up at the Purim Spiel together, rumors started flying. Thinking they were being super clever, Eastern European Jews started to joke that if the two treats got together, their celebrity name would be #Hamantaschen. Well, that was really delayed, guys. Well, it didn't take long before Oznei Haman and Montaschen realized that they were the perfect pair. And even better, by being together, they didn't have to compete with each other for attention and admiration. Within the year, they were married and had given birth to their children, whom they named after their friend's joke celebrity name and the holiday when they had first met. Hamantaschen have explored many interests throughout their life. Though they started out as triangle cookies filled only with poppy seeds, they went through a number of phases and tried out some different styles. First, so as not to upset their parents, Hamantaschen experimented with prunes. Prunes, you see, look a lot like poppy seeds. Sometimes it's hard to tell which you've got until you take a bite into it. And since parents really shouldn't eat their children, the Hamantaschen were able to get away with such a rebellion without their parents noticing. But prunes are a gateway fruit. So it wasn't long before they decided to try riskier substances. It became even more tempting to try new flavors when pruning didn't come with any consequences. Next, preserves of various sorts made their way into the pockets of Hamantaschen, from cherry to apricot to strawberry to lemon. And that's when the real trouble started, because once you can experiment with the filling, it's so much easier to experiment with the dough. You have to be careful, though, because baking is very precise. Too much sugar, too much baking powder, rolling out the dough too thickly or too thinly, setting the oven too high or too low a temperature, and everything gets messed up. It can be such a trial to get the right ratio of cookie to filling, to keep the filling inside the cookie, to keep the cookie moist enough so that it doesn't feel like chalk, to have the cookie maintain its triangular shape, and so on and so forth. Hamantaschen kept trying to transform themselves into what people wanted. But in doing so, they lost their sense of self, the essence of their identity. that crisis is what led to their ultimate decline. Though people have tried to revive Hamantaschen over the years, though they have suggested tweaks to the recipe and tricks for making the perfect cookie and the perfect filling, Hamantaschen have been dying for decades. But they are at peace now and will finally be laid to rest. And those of us who continue on will keep their memory and legacy alive for many more years. When we see the possibilities that come with joining two opposing forces into one that is stronger together, we will keep the legacy of Hamantaschen alive. When we find sweetness in the midst of failure or disgust, we will keep the legacy of Hamantaschen alive. When we persevere through the challenges of baking, we will keep the legacy of Hamantaschen alive. And when we enjoy Purim without having to choke down chalky cookies, we will gladly remember that Hamantaschen used to be alive and are no more. We continue now with a prayer asking for Hamantaschen to find their eternal rest. God full of mercy, who dwells above, give perfection and rest on your holy tongue amongst the poppy, pruny, and cherry who sweeten the sky, to the soul of Hamantaschen, children of Oznei, Haman, and Montaschen, who have gone to their eternal rest. May they be bound up in the bonds of sweetness and goodness, for that is their heritage. May they rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
Who knew? Quick show of hands. How many for Lakis? Oh. And Hamantaschen. Oh, really interesting. Please help me thank our debaters again. And happy Purim.